All right. Good evening and good night, and welcome to the HR Perspective Talk Show. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2015. My name is David, a.k.a. Kimba, a.k.a. Christian. Alongside our special co-host tonight is...
Hey, good night, everyone. And tonight I am Audrey Brown, alongside David Christian.
That's right. Audrey is sitting in tonight. Campbell Soup is on a special assignment. He'll be back soon. She's our special co-host tonight. This is the It's Your Perspective Talk Show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. until. We do have a telephone number. Our telephone number is 340-201-9005. You can also text us on that number as well. But most importantly, you have to go to our website, streaming live from the vi.com. Go to that website, click on the tab that says Watch Us Live, and guess what, Audrey? They'll see us live. We also have email as well, streaming live from the vi@yahoo.com. And we do have some special guests in the studio tonight. Let me bring them on. There they are right there. Wave to the crowd. They are seeing you right now. Dora and Selma and Magdalia. Got that right? Beauty for Ashes Trauma Symposium. We're going to be talking with them in just a few minutes. We are streaming live from the high-tech, low-tech studio, ladies, from an undisclosed location here in the beautiful island of St. Croix. No radio, no TV, internet only. We do not have a frequency. You cannot catch us on the local cable network. You have to get online. Get online with your smartphone, your iPad. Use your Mac or your Windows computer. Just open up your browser, put in streaming live from the vi.com, and you'll see the show. We have many recorded live shows on YouTube and Ustream.tv. Just search for our channel, It's Your Perspective Talk Show. We do have 2 Facebook pages. Please give us a like. Let us know how we're doing. I want to give a special shout out to CHS class of 1982. That's the class that I'm representing. Soup represents that class as well, and so does Keith Wasai Edwards, who was here special co-hosting last night. And Audrey, what class are you representing?
I represent the class of 1977.
77, okay, man. Big ups to that whole crew there. I want a special shout out to Vanessa of Rhythms and iGrade Records, and also Julie and Sharice King. Thank you for helping us in the past with the show. And to all our guests, thanks for being on our show. Over 150 shows on YouTube right now, many guests. We've had an opportunity to talk to many people. It's been about a year and 2 months now, and so we're just having some fun. We're also on Twitter. Hit us up at VI Perspective on Twitter. We're moving straight forward and up. The show's mission is just basically to inform, entertain, and empower everyone. And as everyone knows, Soup does the It's Your Perspective poem, but in light of that, Soup's not here. Audrey's going to do a poem, I guess. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, man. Let's hear it.
So actually, this is an affirmation by Louise Hayes, and it said, "It's okay to ask for help. I give help when others need it, and I ask for help when I need it. It is okay to ask for help."
Okay. Thank you for that so much. And so as we move on here, we're going to go right to our guests. There they are right there. Welcome to our studio. And you guys ready? Yeah. Okay. Welcome to our studio here. Tonight you guys are going to be talking about the Beauty for Ashes Trauma Symposium. So kind of let us know, fill us in on exactly what that is, and I think it's a week-long of events and that kind of thing. So kind of let us know what that is. How do we get to this point with that kind of stuff? Is your microphone on? Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's a little better. Got to hold it up a little closer.
Okay, so I have here with me Dr. Dara Hamilton and also Dr. Magdalia Bradford. Okay, so the Beautiful Ashes Trauma Symposium will be held from June 7th to June 14th. That will be Sunday through Sunday. We'll be having a host of activities in the St. Croix and the St. Thomas St. John district.
Okay. So what exactly is it all about? I mean, Beauty for Ashes Trauma Symposium. What does that mean?
Okay, so a lot of times when people go through trauma, they feel as if their life is at an end, and that's the ashes part of it. But then when they come through it, they see the beauty of everything, that they are beautiful inside out. So therefore we came up with that term, beauty from ashes, sorry. And the Trauma Symposium is basically to cover and to bring an awareness of the trauma and the toxic stress that's right here prevalent in our territory. It's I'm coming from out of the office of the governor, where we have a grant called the Early Childhood Comprehensive System. This grant says that we are going to help our children birth through 3, birth through 5, be able to deal with and mitigate the toxic stress and trauma that they experience. Now, a lot of times people ask, birth through 3 or birth through 5, a child doesn't experience trauma. But what I say to people is that just look at it this way. Have you heard of fetal alcohol syndrome? Yes. Have you heard of children born addicted to some kind of substance because of substance abuse from the parents when they were pregnant with the child? Yes. Therefore, whereby, likewise, if a mom goes through some kind of traumatic period while she was pregnant, then most likely the child will inherit that. Yes, please.
I don't think her mic is on. It is on? Okay, I don't hear you.
All right.
Okay.
I just wanted to add to that and say, too, that, oftentimes when we go through difficult life experiences, we don't see that there could be anything good that could come out of it. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this Beauty for Ashes that you're doing, because it gives a purpose to the pain that people go through, right? And so it just doesn't make it a wasted life experience. Yeah.
And I'd like to just add with that the idea of looking at children who are much younger than we tend to focus on, who maybe aren't in school acting out, and so now we have a teacher calling attention to it, or aren't being necessarily brought in by a parent because they're having some behavior problems in school. But looking at children who are birth to 3, birth to 4, birth to 5, and the fact that our experiences, adult experiences, and environmental experiences can have an impact on them, and trying to figure out how we can intervene as early as possible so that they don't grow up with carrying those experiences with them and affecting the rest of their life or the course of their life, I think is just one of the most important goals of that Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems grant in terms of trauma, looking at a group that we usually don't focus on with respect to trauma. I don't think we really focus on that group.
So is this the first symposium that you guys are having?
This is the first symposium as it relates to the early childhood, and what we're doing is we're trying to get all the agencies and sectors involved, and we're trying to bring that awareness to the community, because our message is basically trauma, toxic stress. We are eliminating the fact that it's taboo and it's a bad word. We're putting a positive spin on it to let people know that, look, it happens, there's help, let's get that help, and let's deal with it as a society, as a community.
Okay.
The other piece, too, about what you both said that I think is important is that the children that you're working with, that age range, it's like Dara said, they're so easily overlooked. And some of the behaviors that typically come from trauma experiences tend to fall into what people may look at as bad behavior in children. And because we are Caribbean people, and because we have very strong views about children being seen and not heard, children knowing their place and those kinds of things, in our culture it's so easy to overlook that these things that we're seeing could be indeed caused by traumatic experiences.
Early trauma.
Exactly, yeah.
And the thing is, both Migdalia and Dara has hit something that I want to bring to our attention. If you look at KidScope, that's where we get a lot of our data from, you'll realize that our children are entering kindergarten not quite prepared.
Okay.
And from kindergarten, we wonder, we like to call children bad. Come on, I don't believe there is a bad child. I believe, yes, there's bad parenting only because we don't know better. But I don't think there's a bad child. And if we stop putting that term and label to children as bad, then we can realize that, hey, I need to help this child. Okay. So what happens is that our children entering kindergarten are not ready. some children enter kindergarten and they don't even know what the letter A is, much less the sound, much less what it even looks like. They don't even know a simple number 1. Why is that? Because they've already gone through so much trauma in their life. So you see, so these are things that we want to help bring a focus on. We want to help bring a light on. And I actually want to call something that Dr. Bradford has been working on. Can you tell us a little bit of what happened this past month, May?
Yes, so May was our mental health month. I am the clinical supervisor at the Department of Mental Health here. And it's pretty much my favorite month of the year now because
it's my birthday.
It's okay. We get to interact with the community and to have them come in. But this month in particular was really good because our theme was before stage 4. And that is before whatever your emotional challenge or your difficult or traumatic event may be, before it gets to the place where you really need a lot of intense intervention, those stages that were involved. In fact, we had Dara come and do a presentation for us on that, which was very, very, very good. For those of you in the community that missed it, you missed something amazing.
It was awesome.
If you're interested in having it, to hear it again, we'll be happy to try to provide that for you. But do you want to talk a little bit, Dara, about the stages that you covered with that?
Sure. We looked at the idea of prevention, similar to the medical model. So we looked at the primary prevention, which is basically preventing symptoms from occurring in the first place. And I think that that's part of what you're doing with your early childhood grant, is how do we even prevent symptoms from occurring? And then we look at secondary prevention, which is pretty much intervention. We're starting to see some symptoms. They're early symptoms, and we want to stop them before they get any worse. And then there's tertiary prevention, where we are really, something has happened, we are having an incident, and we're trying to mitigate the effects of that or reduce the effects of that on someone's functioning. And so we really looked at some strategies that were geared more toward primary prevention and secondary prevention, and looked at mental health as a lifestyle, as a lifestyle factor. The same way we look at some physical diseases can be affected by lifestyle, like diabetes, what we eat and our exercise and so forth, and stress reduction. Looking at mental health that way, the fact that the lifestyle we live can play a role in our development of mental illness.
Okay.
So the presentation was pretty much about how we can employ different lifestyle factors to help ourselves stay more mentally healthy.
What kind of trauma, more specifically, are you guys talking about?
Okay, we're looking at all trauma. For example, here in the Caribbean, we experience hurricanes, okay? And do you know that I met a lady who experienced Hugo, and up to now, as soon as hurricane season begins, she was describing the goosebumps, she was describing like how she feels from the beginning of the hurricane season until the end of the hurricane season.
She's on edge.
She's on edge.
Yes.
Okay, so imagine, because that traumatic event, has never been taken care of, you find that she still hasn't gotten over it. So that, we look at simple things like that, which I shouldn't call it simple.
Look at experiences that we tend to overlook, and I think that that's one of the ones that we tend to overlook in terms of being a traumatic event, the Hugo. And I was on Charlene Springer's show yesterday, and she was talking about Hugo and coming in after it and just noticing that people were traumatized, noticing that their eyes were wide open, that it was clear, but coming from the outside, being able to see it, but maybe those of us who were here not being able to identify it as such. So I think really it is looking at broadening our idea of trauma a little bit and saying we are affected in different ways, even vicarious trauma due to violence in the community and having to hear about it.
And I also met a young person who is very terrified of hurricanes, and when he went through Hugo, I think he said he was either 2 or 3 years old. But guess what? Even if he doesn't quite remember Hugo, he remembered the expressions, the fear, everything that he saw on his caregivers' faces. That would be his mom and his grandmom.
Okay.
And he just remember, like, to him it was a lot of chaos afterwards. So you find that he too has a certain dread for hurricanes, but he don't understand why.
Okay.
I
Again,
wanted to say something about that too, because that's really important. Well, first of all, I think what happens in a traumatic event is that people do not spend time. They're not the typical layperson is not really well versed in what happens in the brain when you experience a traumatic event. And so, in our limbic system in the brain, we have this small almond-shaped space in the brain that is called the amygdala. And the amygdala is always scoping out stressors in our environment. Sometimes it's a protective feature, but when you go through a traumatic event, that's imprinted in there. Mm-hmm. And so, oftentimes people that have a traumatic event, they may not remember all of the particulars of the event. So, for example, when people go through something, let's say a break-in or a rape or something like that, and they're being questioned by the authorities about the specifics of it, sometimes if they're questioned right after the event, or if they're questioned, and then again, if they're questioned sometime later, sometimes their stories won't necessarily match up because their remembrance of the trauma sometimes comes back in what would be little bits and pieces, and those are what we refer to as the flashbacks. And so sometimes there are little things that would trigger that. So someone may be moving along through their life very normally after a traumatic event, and they may smell something or they may hear something, and that would bring the whole event, or at least bits and pieces of it, back to their remembrance. Just like you were saying, Anselmo, so that young man was only 2. But what he does remember from the traumatic event are the faces of the people, the way that things may have seemed after it was over. And so he may not necessarily have the full brunt of, the fear of the hurricane season, but he remembers those little bits and pieces of what he experienced.
He may not have the language for it. And one of the things that we've been doing through the Department of Health, the 3 of us, we've been participating in this learning community regarding trauma. And one of the organizers and leaders, Dr. Vanderkolk, he wrote this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And I think really that's what Dr. Brathwaite is referring to, the fact that our body can keep the score of the traumatic events without our mind even remembering what they were, that they're imprinted in our body in a way that maybe we don't have the language for it, we don't have the particular memory to be able to recall it in the sequence in which it happened. However, somewhere in our body there is that memory, so that sense or that howling of the wind or whatever that remembrance is brings it back to our body. So you get some physiological reactivity, you get tense and on edge and nervous and unsure why this is happening.
Yes.
And I'm happy Dara mentioned Dr. Vanderkolk, because he also talked about intergenerational trauma, and that is where that's, for me, that's the part that I deal with. As I said, birth through 3, birth through 4, birth through 5. And what happens is, as we were talking about from before, the child now they know they may fear something and they don't understand why, and it's because they got it from a parent, from a caregiver, let's put it that way, from just family around them. In our community, you see that our children have to deal with things like death of a family member. Sometimes we have like these shoot-ups, where they just go in and they shoot somebody. That's something that's fearful for children also. We don't consider that aspect of it. Our children have to deal with hearing out the parents being very angry and using this foul language. That's something too that's traumatic for them. I know, for example, I could name my son, and my son, he's very sensitive to loud noises. So if you're somebody who speaks loudly and you come to speak to him, you'll notice he's just like this, he just crouches
kind of shies away a little bit. Yeah,
and it's because you're too loud, so that and I know that when I was pregnant with him, we went through a very hard time, and loud noises, I just couldn't handle it. So now, guess what? I'm seeing that intergenerational trauma in him.
Okay.
And so it trickles down.
Right.
And it's amazing, like we go back to the hurricane, that one event can affect people differently. And as a people, as you spoke about with our culture, we don't know how to ask for help. I'm going back to the poem, right? We really don't know how to ask for help. And so it trickles down. It trickles down to you not being able to help, and then your child or whomever you're responsible for will pick up that same behavior. And of course, that's how we behave as we learned.
And this really is a community effort. I mean, I can remember Hugo pretty well, and I think that one of the things that was protective for me was that we did have a community around us. You know, people did get together even though our roof was gone and the ceiling fell in and, you know, you had all this devastation around you. You did have people, we did know people who were willing to come together and help provide services, provide food, provide just that social support that then helps to reestablish for people who've been through a trauma, the world is being safe. And helps to provide that support. And so while sometimes we can look and say we need a professional to step in and to help someone get through trauma, sometimes that is necessary. And other times, some people who have a good social support network, that can help in large ways to increase our resilience. That's one of the factors that improves resilience, is having that social support network. So I just want to then emphasize how important the community is in just supporting and loving one another. And I think that part of the grant that Anselma is administering does that. It really reaches out to the community. How can we pull the community together? How can we inform members of the community in such a way that they then start to take care of and support other members of the community, because it increases their awareness. This is the last thing I'm going to say on this, so I can let someone else jump in. One of the things that I think Dr. Brathwaite mentioned earlier was, and Selma as well, was this idea of the so-called bad child. One of the things that we've been learning through our training, our learning groups and communities and so forth, is the idea of removing the judgment and looking at behavior differently and recognizing what is traumatic behavior. If a child has been traumatized, you're going to see that acting out behavior that we say is bad, and we tend to respond to it in a way that may actually increase and reinforce trauma as opposed to help them. And so we think that if a child is acting out, we need to beat them, we need to yell at them, we need to give them harsh punishment and so forth. And in fact, we could be revisiting that trauma upon them because they're already in a very fragile state. And so we really have to look at behavior differently.
And I want you to understand, we're not advocating spare the rod, you spoil the child. We're not saying that. What we're saying is, let's look at things differently. For example, I have a 20-year-old. She's at college right now. And I remember when I lived in Pennsylvania, and my mom came to visit. And my mom saw me using what we call the 1, 2, 3 magic. And my mom was so amazed. And I actually remember my mom saying, which I think my mom is a great mom, right? I actually remember my mom saying, I wish I knew this method.
What is that method? Can you describe it for us?
Yes, let me tell you about the 1, 2, 3 magic.
You say the 1, 2, 3 magic?
1, 2, 3 magic.
Okay.
So a lot of times children do not understand what it is we adults are seeing that they're doing that is misbehavior. Let's not call it bad. It's just misbehaving. But what happens is that the child doesn't know better. Now look at it this way. We are adults. We have grown through some things, and sometimes we still do, for adults, bad things. So then when a child misbehaves, we want to call them bad and want to just maybe smack them or yell at them one time. The 1, 2, 3 magic says to the child, and I'll call my daughter's name, Keneal, you were not supposed to cross the road. Okay? I'm not used to cross the road. You were not supposed to take that apple without asking me. Right? Please don't do it again. And that child decides, oh yeah? So she still reaches for that apple. And you said, Keneal, I've spoken to you one time. This is the second time. That's 2. And you wait for a little time for them to be able to respond. So 5 seconds, which I actually have a book coming out called 5-Second Response. Okay? So you tell her that's 2. And she's going to dare you and decide, I'm going to do it. So you say that's 3, magic. And the magic can be, you put them in timeout. And timeout is just giving them a break for them to be able to recollect. And also, I always say timeout is not really for the child, it's really for the parent, because now I'm angry at what you've done. But I should not be disciplining. I do not advocate disciplining a child when you're angry, because that could cause some serious repercussions. We can hurt them. Yeah. Okay, so timeout is really for you, the parent, the caregiver, the adult. So you give them, according to their age, 1 minute, and you give them timeout. depending on what the situation is, like if the child is crossing the road, of course we're going to have to yell and pull them back, okay, and stuff like that. But then other little things, you know, you could say that's 1, that's 2, and that's 3.
So
And
basically,
then
the consequence comes after the
after,
at
yes.
once. So you're giving them a chance to
Right.
correct their
And
behavior.
as the child gets more into it, let me tell you what my son, who is 9 years old, has done. He will wait. You say that's 1, so he'll be like, oh, I have 2 and 3. That's what he's thinking. He's processing it this way. So I had to say to him, you know what, son? I'm not counting to three for you anymore. We'll count to 2. So then, by the time he was about 5, he's like, oh, I still have a second count. I can still do it a second time, you know? So I said to him, you know what? 1 count. So as you progress and the child learns it, and these are some of the tools we want to give the parents to work with. In that way, it lessens you being stressed out that I hit this child and I have to, you know, and then, you know, the very careful parent, they feel very bad for having, you know, disciplined this child in a harsh manner. So this is a tool that you have that can help them.
So let me ask a question here. So what were we doing prior to this grant dealing with this?
That's a great question. I relived that question for one of the doctors to answer simply
as
because I'm new here.
What we can do is leave it to people who are working in the system, so we can look at how the systems have been dealing with it. But I worked in the school system for a while, for about 8 years as a school psychologist, and I can't say that there was an organized effort regarding trauma and how we were going to identify children who were somehow traumatized, other than the fact that we know that we're mandated reporters.
Okay.
And so, you know, you notice a bruise, or you notice something on a child, or you suspect abuse, and you have to report that. And then, of course, there was psychological counseling for those who are in special education, and that is part of their IEP. So in terms of a move, to me, this is something that is lately we have become aware of the impact of trauma on our communities, and I think that it's national. It's not just here. It is
Okay.
a national move to identify what is really trauma.
Okay.
Right. And, you know, the other part to that, too, I think that just all of the conversations that we're now having here in the Virgin Islands around trauma, I think what that is helping us to do is to desensitize ourselves to the stigma associated with pain.
Right.
Because we often try to hide our pain, you know, and the truth is that, as was said earlier, sometimes we don't have the language to express our pain. And so what this does is it allows people to experience normalization around the fact that there are painful things in the world. We are all seeing it, and we are acknowledging that there are some aftershocks, if you will, that will occur from not addressing the pain. And so it gives talking about it gives people the language to use, because as you were saying earlier, sometimes we don't even know how to ask for help.
Yes.
And so the other piece of that too is some of the behaviors that were typically looked at as bad behaviors. Those are the things that we see readily. But you know, one of the things that Dr. Vander Kolt, who is over the Complex Trauma Treatment Network, he's one of the co-directors, he talks about children who have trauma just not being curious anymore. And
What do you mean not being curious?
so they, you know, children are naturally curious.
Okay.
They're naturally inquisitive
You want
about
to know
things,
more
and right, they want to know more.
into
But
how things work.
exactly. And so one of the symptoms that can be overlooked is a child that just doesn't have that natural developmental curiosity. And so those children, we may overlook them. We
Okay.
may not perceive that they have an issue with trauma. We may just say that they're quiet, or they're reserved, or they don't talk much, or they're not talking much to their parents, or whatever. But, you know, it's little things like that
Okay.
that will be overlooked, and then can get you to, as Dr. Hamilton was saying, to that stage 4, where all of those things haven't been addressed. So now it goes from, having an exposure to a difficult experience to now being an identity.
Okay.
And so that is what we're trying not to do here in the Caribbean, have people hide those things. And so we do have the learning community. We started the learning community back in October of last year, and so we started with a big bang. We kind of tapered off a little bit. My fault for that, but we're getting back on track with the learning community. And what that means is this: we have different agencies on the island. We are partnering with the Department of Health, the Department of Human Services, the Virgin Islands Behavioral Services, we're
Women's Coalition.
Women's Coalition. We're trying to have a representative from everywhere to keep the conversation going. And so eventually what we're hoping is that we can have a way that everyone on the island is able to identify the trauma when they see it. So some type of assessment, even if it isn't necessarily an assessment that is completely formalized for everyone to use. Mm-hmm. So even in for example, the religious community on the island, if you're seeing something that's happening in your churches, if you're noticing certain things, then that would be someone that you could refer for other services, or even churches could provide services. But without the conversation, we don't have the vision. And so that's what we really need. And so that's what the learning community, the Complex Trauma Treatment Network, that's what we're trying to achieve. And again, I think that one of our greatest challenges here is the stigma of even expressing that there is a problem.
Okay.
For example, we said parents, parents may be willing to say their children have a problem, but they may not be willing to look at themselves as having a part of that problem too, or as someone was saying, kind of passing that on intergenerationally.
Right. And we participate in that as well. I think as providers, we are really focused on children and taking care of children because they're not able to advocate for themselves in the same way. And one of the things that we're really starting to look at is the idea of what happened to the parent, that this now happened to the child. And so being able to take care of that family system is really an important thing, to be able to offer the care and the support to the parent, so that they can better care and support their children.
So I was going to ask, so how does it work? I experienced Hugo, and I think I'm a little traumatized. So do you have a number or an office, and you just come in and say, I think I'm traumatized? How do you start that process of getting help?
Well, what we're trying to do with the grant is we're trying to get all the agencies and sectors in the Virgin Islands, that is in the territory, all 3 islands, to have a comprehensive assessment. Therefore, and whereby, like I was explaining to somebody, when I first came to St. Croix a few years ago, I was handicapped. I couldn't walk. I was handicapped from the lower torso. And when I called one place for service, then they would send me to someplace else, and they'd send me to someplace else. That gets frustrating. Mm-hmm. We want to eliminate that, okay? We want to be able to, because I'm already going through my own set of trauma, and having to call, that gets me even more depressed.
More frustrated.
Understand? Right. So then there you go. So now we're trying to have a comprehensive system, which we're trying to work on with the learning committees. We have agencies and sectors coming on board. We have people like Karen Hunt, who is from VI Partners. We have Frederickson Healthcare. We have what are some of the other agencies that are working along with us?
We have, as we said before, the Women's Coalition.
Yes.
And I believe for the grant, you guys are also partnering or trying to reach out to pediatricians and others in the medical field who may come in contact with more people. Yes. And I think that one of the things is really doing a self-assessment. If we feel like we're not coping well, or feeling more anxious than we'd like to feel, or feeling sadder than we like to feel, we're not functioning the way we want a better quality of life, I think it starts there. Sometimes it's difficult to identify a particular trauma and say, you know what, that's what it was, because we've been through lots of different things in our lives. Hugo, yes, we may have been through a relationship that was difficult for us. We may have been through some things when we were children that kind of sit on the edge of our minds. And so sometimes it's hard to say what's happening to me right now relates to a very specific trauma in my life. But we can assess ourselves and say, where am I and how am I feeling? Let me go and investigate that in order to try to resolve some of that. And maybe it will lead back to a trauma. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll just be some things that some conflicts that we need to work out and resolve in our minds. But the first step really is to say, where am I? Where do I want to be? Give myself the permission to be in a different place, and then there are many agencies I think that we can start going to.
True.
Yeah,
Okay.
and to go back to the question that you originally asked, that is what we're trying to do here in the Virgin Islands, trying to bring everybody together, have everybody on the same page, to lessen the frustration that may come with just being put from one person to the next, from an agency to the next, and what have you. And also, we're looking at, you could start calling in, folks, 340-201-9005.
That's it,
because
right there.
we need to know how can we help you. What do you want to see? Because this is for you, our community, and we can be the brains up here thinking that we know what you want. But if you don't come out to the various events that we have, and if you don't call in, then how do we know what exactly to target? So please call in.
That's a good point. I think that, the other piece is that as we talk more about it, and we've said this several times before, but I think it just bears repeating as many times as we need to in this time that we're sharing together, is just having the conversations. One of the things that we have a very strong presence with here in the Caribbean in general is narrative. We're very strong on narrative. We have a history of narratives as part of how we entertained historically. And so I think that if we can just begin to insert into the narratives of our daily living that's not that I saw Johnny doing X, Y, or Z. I wonder if Johnny is experiencing some trauma. Instead of saying he doesn't get enough licks, So we do have the narrative that we can ride on. And so what you're saying is, where would someone go if they had this issue? And so what we're trying to say, though, is that the network would provide a variety of places that can address that. Mm-hmm. So it isn't just come to the Department of Health or go to see Dr. Hamilton in her practice, you would have people who at some level may be able to address that person. They may not need to come in to see us, depending on where they are.
Okay.
We talked earlier about the stages, But I think that the bigger piece is just to have people have more of an awareness of it. Okay. And so one of the things that we want to do with the learning community is to do other things that could even be creative. Maybe get the art community involved and have some art surrounding trauma. Sometimes that's an easier way to begin to broach that topic in the community.
Okay.
Or
how about animal therapy?
Right.
And we also have hydrotherapy. We have the arts. For example, we may have taekwondo that has been known to help children before, to be able to help them to calm down. We also have stuff like music, so we do have that rich heritage. So let's plug into it and use it. Now, some of the resources we have in our community that we may not be unaware of. The military, they have a resilience program. Mm-hmm. They have what they call a Master Resilience course. And I'm going to put Master Sergeant Nazario right here on the spot. He's a very awesome trainer. We have all been to the training and we know how very awesome good. He is.
Very good, yeah.
So they are willing, the military, they're willing to give us that training. You understand?
To help in the private sector?
To help
everybody.
Okay.
Because I have already arranged where the frontline folks got it. Now I want the parents of children birth through 5 to call me and say to me, I want that training. You understand? So if they call, then I can set it up. If you get, both in the St. Croix, St. Thomas and John district, let's get into that because we have it. We have the resources. It's not like you don't have it. The number is 773-1404, extension 4822. At 773-1404, extension 4822. So call us because we have the resources. We, for example, another big part of it is forgiving ourselves, and Dr. Bradford. Yeah, McDonald just did something on forgiveness, and that was a very important aspect.
It was. I was very excited to do it. It actually is a topic that I'm very interested in, and I had someone just this week say to me, I'm not into forgiveness. I'm into mercy. And I said, well, I am too, because they're cousins, so forgiveness and mercy, I'm cool with that. But you know, it does become a little bit of a touchy subject when you're looking at trauma, because you know, pain is something that we can cherish, whether we enjoy it or not. It can be something that belongs to us,
right?
And that and even though it may not feel comfortable, we still want to hold on to it because we may we have a right to it. We may understand it, and so to talk about forgiveness, sometimes that seems like absolving the person or the situation that has brought this difficult experience into your life. But one of the things that I do in my forgiveness seminars is that, you know, I help people to really look at the fact that forgiveness is for them. Now that's at first blush, you know, but there's so many levels that we can look at when it comes to forgiveness, because, you know, if we can just look at our bodies, we're hardwired for forgiveness, right? What if you had a cut on your body and your body decided not to forgive you?
Right.
Then we would all be walking around with lots of wounds, right? And so, of course, we do have those wounds on the inside. But it's a big work, because forgiveness actually asks you to look at the situation that has occurred and renegotiate your thinking about that situation with the possibility of reconciliation. Now, sometimes people think that forgiveness means that you do have to reconcile with that person. But you don't necessarily have to. Forgiveness offers the possibility or the environment where that can occur, should you want it to occur. And so one of the things, and I won't go on and on because I think I could talk for 3 hours on this topic, but anyway, one of the things that people struggled with in the seminar was, well, you know, do you think that this is forgivable or that's forgivable? There's some things that are not forgivable. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. And I think that, you know, there's a fine line between people's understanding of reconciliation and the offering of forgiveness. You know, you can offer it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be aligned with that person again. It really is for you to begin to renegotiate how you're going to order your life around that circumstance in a healing way for you, allowing you to let go of that.
And I want to add something to that, because we have in this Trauma Symposium, I said we have a series of events coming up. And this Sunday, we will be in St. Thomas, Emancipation Garden, 12 through 4. Come out, we have some snacks there for you guys, refreshments. We have prizes for the kids. But one of our main speakers is a lady who, as a child, she went through, I don't know how she can actually say, you know what, I am willing to talk. I am willing to share my experiences. And if you want to hear more, come on out. You'll hear her. But the thing is...
Can I interrupt you for a second and ask you if you could give I don't want you to tell her whole story, but I think that you told me a tiny bit about it, and I don't want you to tell it. But just, I think it's really important to recognize that pain has power.
Yes.
And it doesn't only have the power to consume.
Okay,
but it has the power to uplift.
I will actually say her name. Her name is Milagros Romero, and she's listening in tonight. Hi there. She's been helping me put this series of events together. And one of the things, without giving too much of her story away, is that she was severely abused sexually, emotionally, mentally, verbally as a child. And she began to think and didn't realize, I think she said until the age of 13, that was not the normal way of living, you know? And she said that she had to come to a point where, for her to move on with her life, she had to learn to forgive the perpetrators, okay? She had to learn to make herself no longer be the victim. And now she's willing to talk. And I'll tell you something about Milagros. Milagros speaks, her natural speaking voice is as if she's constantly hoarse, okay? She just have that because why? You'll find out at the Trauma Symposium.
Yeah, she's a sweet lady. She's been on our show already too.
When
she is the reason why we're here.
Yes, exactly.
When a person experiences deep pain and turmoil, they feel crushed to bits and pieces, ashes, if you will. Healing allows the beauty to evolve from the ashes, hence the title of the Trauma Symposium. And so I read this to bring us back to, and you spoke a little bit about what's supposed to be happening. And so I gathered from, you'll have speakers there, yes, right? So give us a little bit more because we want people to come out and we want them to know where the resources are. Give us a little more of what's going to happen on the 7th. We know that our friend is going to be speaking.
Yes.
And she has a powerful story.
She does.
So what else? Why should I come?
Let me tell you why you should come. Apart from the many gifts and giveaway we had for the children, the thing is, the beautiful ashes, we have what we call the bazaar, because I name it bazaar. It's a word I don't hear anymore. I grew up in St. Lucia. Hey there, St. Lucians. And it's a word that we use for a rally or fair. We have what we call the kickoff, which will be in St. Thomas, 12 through 4, Emancipation Garden. Asking you to come out there. And we are looking at people who have experienced deep emotional pain. And there's no reason why they should forgive. Is that right, Doctor? No, they should forgive.
They should forgive.
And
right?
because they have forgiven, they have been able to move on. Hence the beauty in their life. And now they can share. And you will find that our speaker, Milagros Romero, June 7th, and our other speakers, Ziara Alvarez, June 14th here in St. Croix, Fort Christiansted, 12 to 4. Again, we'll have a lot of prizes, but that's not why I want you to come out. I want you to come out to hear the stories so that you can see what we're trying to do here for us.
And
not for
have
you,
a forum,
not for
right?
me.
You also have a forum
Yes,
on Monday.
we have the forum Monday, May 8th, 6 o'clock UVI, St. Croix.
June 8th.
June
June
8th. May 8th is my birthday, people. Sorry about
So
that.
you like May too, huh?
Yes, I do. So Monday, June 8th, UVI, Great Hall, St. Croix, and that's the forum. And then in St. Thomas, it will be Windward Passage, same time, 6 through 8. We're asking to come out to the forums. We're going to be having doctors there present. We'll be having persons who can speak to trauma as they experience by themselves and as they have been trying to help the community.
On a one-on-one kind of basis, or you're talking just in general to everybody?
General to everybody, and it's going to be a panel. Dr. Dara Hamilton will be our moderator for the one in St. Croix, and Dr. Celia Victor in St. Thomas, she will be our moderator. We will also have, we'll be having in St. Thomas, we'll be having some youth from My Brother's Workshop, and they have been through a hard time. And the fact that they're even coming out as young people to share their story, that is going to be powerful. We also have Dr. Alberto Cornier. He will be here from Puerto Rico. He's a pediatrician, and he's deeply into the trauma as experienced by children. Okay? So these are some of the things that we have out there that we need you to come out to, because we need to hear your voices. We need to know what you want us to do. Come to the bazaars, June 7th and June 14th.
And I think it provides an opportunity, too, for some normalization of people's experiences.
Yes.
The more that we talk about it and the more we say, hey, you know, you went through this and maybe this is why you're having these types of difficulties, and people can connect their current experiences to things that have happened and say, you know, nothing's wrong with me. I went through something difficult, and this is why this is going on right now in my life. I can work on this. This can change. And so I think it offers some hope. It offers an opportunity for people to see other people who've been resilient and maybe tap into their own resilience around these issues, because we are pretty resilient. You know, we things happen and we keep on going. Even though sometimes we're carrying some of that load with us, we keep on struggling with it. And you know, sometimes it's time to lay it down. And I think by having some of these conversations, we start unpacking some of those bags. We start letting people say, you know, what am I carrying? What can I let go of? And figure out some strategies for how to let them go.
In the military, we use the ball because and the egg, right? So what
you're talking about the stress ball?
The ball, the bouncing ball.
Well, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So what we say is that, what are you, a bouncing ball or an egg? What happens to the egg when you throw it? Does it come back?
Nope.
No,
Nope.
it breaks.
Right.
Okay. But when we learn the resilient techniques, then what happens? It becomes a bouncing ball. You know, you can bounce back. You don't necessarily have to let your experiences keep you down. You understand? And then as you begin to bounce back and you become more and more resilient, then you're starting to give your children, okay, tools that can help them. Because now that you have the tools to help yourself, you can give your children those tools to help themselves. And then now that they have these tools, they can now start spreading it around. And that's how we become bouncing balls in our community.
Right. And I just want to say something about that too, because at that wonderful training that we went to on resilience, one of the first things that we did was that we did look at the ball, and we also looked at a broken egg. And, you know, sometimes when people see a broken egg, they feel like it's really good for nothing unless it breaks into the pot or, you know, something that you're using it for. But a broken egg on the ground sometimes is viewed as not being viable for anything, or on a counter, let's say that. But the truth is that it has many other creative ways of being used when it's broken. And that isn't any different than us. You know, that's why I really like the title of the symposium, Beauty for Ashes. Because,
Can you read that again, please?
yes.
Sure. When a person experiences deep pain and turmoil, they feel crushed to bits and pieces, ashes, if you will. Healing allows the beauty to evolve from the ashes. Hence the title of the Trauma Symposium. And what is that?
Beauty from ashes.
From ashes.
Yes.
And you know what that brings to mind, and I used this the other day, also that analogy. There are those pictures of those buildings, some of the so-called ruined buildings, the abandoned buildings that you guys know the pictures I'm talking
Right.
about, and how beautiful they are when they adorn these offices, right? These
Right.
expensive offices with these pictures of these buildings that are in so-called disrepair or have falling apart or in ruin. And I think of how beautiful they look. And just taking a picture of it hasn't changed the nature of the building, but just our perspective of it has
exactly.
changed because we've taken a picture of it and framed it and called it art. And it just brings to me the idea that no matter what's going on with us, our beauty is still there, our value is still there, and no matter what the trauma is, no matter how much the winds hit those buildings, they're still standing and they're still beautiful even within that. And so the fact that you can see the beauty in that, the beauty that comes from some hard times, that there's still beauty there.
In the military resilience, master resilience training program, there are many things that I like, but one of my favorite was what they call the hunt the good stuff. And the thing is, no matter how bad your day has been, you can at least look for one thing positive that happened, you know, and then if you can concentrate on that one positive thing, all right, then you begin to grow. So likewise, when we go through experiences that seem to make our life be ruins or ashes, if you will, then you find that when we begin to say, okay, well, I went through this, but how does this adverse experience that I have had, how does this help me grow as a person? What's the beauty that I can get from it? And the beauty that you can get from it is you get to share it. And in getting to share it, you can tell somebody else some of the ways that you went, that you've had to travel, that you've had to go through, that the perspective that you had to look at in order to have been able to be healed.
And, you know, that's really important because it takes a lot of courage to own your own story, especially if it's a painful story. And so as these people come out and they share in the Beauty for Ashes, what they're saying is that there is value to my pain, and I said that before, but that then gives all of us permission to own our stories, but not only to own them privately, but to own them publicly.
And help someone else.
You know, certainly we are entitled to our privacy, and everyone hasn't earned the right to hear our stories. But I think that what's really important is to just agree that we all will travel a difficult path in life, and to help people begin to have the language to say those things.
Okay.
To have parents not hide in plain sight. You know, sometimes children who are going through a difficult time will look at their parents and they seem very strong and they seem, you know, quite the disciplinarian, and they don't really feel like their parents could have ever gone through anything like what they may be going through.
Right.
And so to beginning the conversation normalizes that connection between parents and children. Sometimes there's a fear that's causing parents not even to have that conversation with their children. So I think that as we talk more about it, you know, even if it's in conversations like this, where people are hearing and maybe they'll talk about some of the things that we said this evening or even their own stories, it begins to help us to recognize that these are not things we need to run from. And so I'm really hoping that more people will come out and hear that and they will be impacted by these stories. I know that a story has a longer lasting effect sometimes than, having people try to discipline you. But if you hear how someone has navigated a difficult life circumstance, sometimes that really can change your life for the rest of your life.
Because you realize that you're not alone.
You do.
Yes. So you spoke about the kickoff, the 7th. We spoke about the forum on the 8th. And there is a radio show that's coming up. The professional dinner.
The professional dinner is to try and get the pediatricians on board. It's been quite difficult because the pediatricians in our territory, they are overworked. So we're trying to get them to sit down with us to help us be able to come up with an assessment tool, a comprehensive assessment tool that can be used across the territory. A comprehensive assessment tool so that if I move with all my problems and with my child from St. Croix to St. Thomas or St. John, that tool is still in place. You understand? So the professional dinner will be having Dr. Alberto Corner. He's a pediatrician. I think he's listening in tonight because I sent him this link. And he will be addressing the pediatrician, and their role in this, especially helping our children.
Okay, so the pediatricians are... So this dinner is basically for pediatricians.
Yes, for pediatricians.
Okay,
And we
so it's sort of a working dinner. Okay.
It's a working dinner. I will have some psychologists there also.
Okay.
Yes.
That's one of the beautiful parts of that grant is the idea that you're trying to pull everybody in on the same page so that if a child isn't necessarily seen by a psychologist or it's not picked up in a school system, that the pediatrician will pick it up, that they have their trauma lens on. That's one of the things we've been talking about, is all of us who are in systems that come in contact with people be able to adopt this trauma lens so we can then say, hey, let's refer you on where you can get some more help in that area. And so I think that that's just one of the fantastic things about that particular grant, where you're focusing on really young children and being able to just intervene. Primary prevention, secondary prevention, right? We're starting right there before.
From the very beginning, yeah.
Right,
Right.
exactly. And how can we address those effects? How can we address what's going on and support the parents in the home so that they can, if they've done some things that are not too helpful, that they can recognize that this isn't helpful for the child, and how can they do things that are different, and how can we as systems support them in that, and pulling parents in as allies in a non-judgmental way. And saying, hey, we know you don't know, or we know you maybe have been through some stuff too, and this is what we're seeing. However, let's work with you so that we can have a better outcome for yourself and your children.
So how do you guys envision this working for students? Someone's in first grade or kindergarten, and they need some help. Will they be taken out of school, or will they be dealt with maybe during school hours? Or how do you guys envision that working?
Or the month before in Selma, you had people that were going to schools and reading stories for the children.
That was last month.
Okay, so that was last month. And
April.
Okay, all right. Right, that was April. Boy, we just started June. Anyway, so, I think that we can't stress enough really trying to work the theme of trauma into our activities of daily living, not as something that we just approach because we're trying to put all of this hyper-focus on a day or an event. But for example, if you had someone that came into the schools and read a story where someone did demonstrate some resiliency after they went through a difficult life circumstance, or where teachers have things that they're teaching their kids, how to breathe in their classes, how to take time out and maybe do some visualization, things like that are on the level of the ages of these children, so that they have an actively functioning toolbox as they get older. And so I think the whole premise of it is, not to kind of look at it and say, well, you have trauma, or you have trauma, but to really incorporate some things into the way we live.
Right.
So that as part of the way a child may start their school, maybe to have a couple moments of silence where they're able to reflect on something that is positive, so they organize the way that they think differently as they approach their day. So even when they start to feel something that's happening that's different, as Dr. Hamilton was saying, they could begin to recognize, well, this isn't necessarily in keeping with how I was feeling 3 months ago when I was doing this in class and it was feeling so free and so comfortable for me. And imagine if a child could identify those things in themselves in kindergarten, elementary school. If they could say, that story that you read, teacher, made me think of something I went through, or, whatever the language may need to be, right? So I think that it's really important to recognize that what we're talking about is a lifestyle of embracing the fact that challenges will come, but that they don't necessarily have to be hidden and fester to the point where it does get to this major mental health challenge.
And I think that we can use, I think that we can use what we, as a people, right, we can use that, but there's this toolbox, and so the tools in this box was used one way. Now there's a different way to use it. It's that 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And using a trauma lens, I think is very important for all of us. And I think that that's what both of these do. The trauma learning community through the Department of Health, and then through the Office of the Governor, the grant, the Early Childhood Grant, then helps us look at things differently. So even if we're using the 1, 2, 3 magic, if we have our trauma lens on, we're using that not in a punitive way, but we're using it in a way to help a child self-regulate, to learn how to come down off of those times when they're feeling so uncomfortable, so physiologically, so physically uncomfortable that they have to lash out, scream out, run away, and engage in behaviors that we are like, what are you doing? You need to be sitting down. Why can't you just sit down and listen and learn? And they're just like, I have got to get out of here because their body is telling them this is not safe. So if we have our trauma lens on, regardless of the system that we're in, we should be able to say, you know what? I know some strategies to help this child calm down. And I can look at this child in a different way so that I don't rev him back up by being punitive or harsh or meting out discipline in a way that reinforces the trauma.
Yeah. And if I may add, I'm a firm believer in children live what they learn. Therefore, if we can get our parents, our caregivers, our family members to get on board, okay, then what you learn now, your child will learn it and therefore live it. And I think that's our forum discussion topic. How can I affect the next generation by dealing with trauma and stress today? And if you come out to UVI Monday, June 8th, 6 through 8, and then Thursday, June 11th, Windward Passage 6 through 8, then you will see, and you can also help us see, how can we affect the next generation? How can we make a better tomorrow for our children by dealing with these topics that we've left taboo for far too long here in the Caribbean?
So on the 8th and on the 11th, it's open to
the public.
Okay.
Open to everybody. Please come on out.
And you don't have to register or anything. You just come out.
Just come on out.
Okay.
And please, when you come on out, bring your perspective.
Let me ask a question here. How much does our culture play into this whole thing of trauma? Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, a lot of sense.
It does. And so, we do have ways that we try to regulate. I think we've talked about that quite a bit tonight in terms of using a lot of punitive measures. It's not uncommon for us to see kids having spankings. That's part of the way that we live our lives here in the Caribbean. And so I think that the piece that we're really trying to emphasize here is that some of those very things that may be viewed as punishable acts by parents or teachers are the very things that children or even adults may be using to deal with their traumatic experiences. So things like isolation, as I said before, kids who are not curious anymore. Some of the ways in which people may lash out may not necessarily be that they're lashing out at you, but they may be lashing out at the experience that is resonating now with them from that traumatic event. But they haven't necessarily learned how to have a conversation even with themselves about it. And so here again, talking about it and being able to help people recognize these things in themselves, I think is key. Again, in the book, The Body Keeps Score, by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, he spoke about a variety of things that people can do that seem very, very simple. For example, yoga. Really helps
Self-care.
really helps to regulate and affects the brain in such a healing way. And when we first started with the development of the learning community, we saw a very interesting video where there were a few therapists that got together and worked with children and had them tell their painful stories. And then as they told their stories, someone worked with them in developing a play from their painful stories. And then it was a musical.
Okay.
And then some of the kids got involved in recognizing that their pain had a purpose. And so all of a sudden now, they weren't just the experiencers of the pain. They actually were, resiliency/pain practitioners, where they were going out there and helping people to recognize that, yes, this is my story, but hey, look what I can do with my story.
Yeah, and I think through the intergenerational transmission, we see that, we can transmit a trauma culture in a way. We can transmit. But we also need to recognize, I think, that culture changes. It's not fixed. I'm sure what's going on today was not going on 200 years ago. Our values may have shifted a little bit. Our behaviors may have shifted a little bit. Our foods have been influenced. Everything has been influenced. And so culture is not fixed. And I think sometimes when we hold on to cultural practices that may not be helpful in the defending it by saying, but this is part of our culture, I think is really not the greatest position to take all the time. Absolutely. Because culture is really something that evolves, and that we have to evolve and move along with it.
We
have to be able to do that. Culture practices that may not be helpful. For example, keeping it as taboo. That's something else we have here, not only in the territory but in the Caribbean as a whole. Do not go back out and say what has happened in this house. What happens here stays here. And then very soon, so then now that happened in my household. So now when I was growing up, so now in my own household that I have now, my children learn the same thing. So then, everything
and they can't get help. I mean, that's what comes for me, is that you can't get help if you can't say what's wrong.
Through it, and you keep, and then I don't understand why I'm feeling this way. Or my daughter doesn't understand why she's feeling this way, and it's probably because I did that, and then maybe my mom felt that way so I got it from her, and she got it from her mom, who probably got it from her mom. Intergenerational. But then when we begin to speak about these things, when we begin to open up, when we begin to look for help instead of making it taboo, and you're going through that? Oh my goodness. Or you're depressed? Oh my goodness, we've been there. No. Everybody has what makes them tick. Everybody has what makes them not be able to cope. Everybody has what makes them feel like down, depressed. So why can't we deal with it?
I'd like to share a story, because we talked about forgiveness earlier, and different cultures have practices for how forgiveness works in their culture. So, in South Africa, there is a tradition in some of the villages where people have a built-in way to restore order and forgiveness in their communities. So when someone does an egregious act and it wounds someone in the village, the whole village feels wounded, and that person is brought into the middle of the village, and the entire village surrounds that person, and everyone, one by one, goes up to that person and reminds them of something that they had done in their lives that was positive.
And the good stuff.
And that was positive. And by the time the whole village has done that, that person's remembrance of who they were when they were functioning as their best selves is what they're grabbing onto and wanting to move towards being again. So, I think if we could even have conversations like that, what do we do culturally that promotes trauma being hidden? What do we do that promotes people, not really having the language? Why are we hiding so much about our pain? Because obviously it's there. And, I think one of the things that we see is, people who are walking the streets who are very, very sick. And everyone thinks, well, I'm not that, Well, that started somewhere, like Dr. Hamilton was saying earlier. That's probably stage 4. But there's so many things that we can do before we get to that point. And I think just the conversation about trauma, normalizing trauma in our culture is one of the bigger steps for that.
Okay. You ladies doing okay? I know it's getting a little warm in here. We're all sweating. And we don't have the luxury of central air here, so we have to kind of deal with it, you know. But you ladies okay?
We are, thank you.
Okay. So it's about 9:18 p.m. You guys have more to say? You want to just sort of maybe run through the schedule real quick and that kind of stuff?
Well, we are asking all the agencies, sectors, community, please come out. Please come out and support this endeavor, because at the end of the day, it's only for you, for us, by us. Now, like I said, the bazaars will be June 7th, St. Thomas, June 14th, St. Croix. St. Thomas, it will be Emancipation Garden, 12 through 4. St. Croix, it will be Christiansted Fort, 12 through 4. We have the forums, which will be June 8th and June 11th. June 8th in St. Croix, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at UBI Great Hall. June 11th in St. Thomas at Windward Passage, 6 through 8. Then we also have some radio talk shows. I think we'll have some people right here again on June 9th.
June 9th, yes.
Yes, some folks will be here with you to just cover another aspect of trauma here in the Virgin Islands. We will also be on Robert Moorhead's show on June 10th, 10 o'clock, 9:70 a.m. And I think that'll be it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any final words? I guess each of you can, have the final say.
I just want to say that it really is a privilege to address this conversation again and to continue to do so. I'm hoping that as time goes by that there will be less shame associated with trauma and more, as I think Dr. Hamilton said it perfectly, just more love, really, when you look at it. Just people really regarding other people who are living in pain with more love and normalization.
All right, hold on a second here. We have someone is calling in here. Let's see if we can get this call. Hello, talk show. Hello? Hello? Are you there? Hello, can you hear me? Someone sounds like they're listening to the show. It's a few second delay there. Hello? Well, maybe not. We'll just...
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Hi, Milagros.
Hello? Milagros? Yeah.
Cut off.
Well, we continue on here. Continue on. The final thoughts? Final comments?
So, it's my pleasure, of course, to be here and to talk about this topic, because it's very, very needed, I think, especially that idea of putting on our trauma lens and really recognizing what's going on. And those of us who are working in systems that deal with people, taking a non-judgmental, non-punitive stance, and recognizing or answering the question or asking the question, what happened to you, as opposed to what's wrong with you, is one of the ways we want to shift our thinking regarding people, is what happened to you. And of course, I really loved your statement, Dr. Brathwaite, and I really do believe that kindness, and we have to offer that kindness to ourselves. We have to offer that love to ourselves. We have to start there, and we also have to offer it outward. And so I just think that just daily, when we find ourselves sort of beating ourselves up a little bit or getting down on ourselves, trying to shift that thinking and say, I offer love to myself, I offer peace to myself, and so forth, and give yourself the opportunity to feel up and to feel peaceful. So,
and I want the community to know that we do have the assessment tools. We do have the toolkit, the 1 to 3 magic, the 5-second response, the resilience tactics by the military. We do have these things that we want to share with you. Call me, sometime. 773-1404, extension 4822. And if you don't get through, leave a message for me. Leave your name, your number. I will call you back. I always do. So call me and let's see how together we can work. Come out to the events and let us know how we can help you, because that's why we are here. We've been training frontline and staff for them to know how to do what they need to do. You know, the next thing we want to make sure that our teachers have the tools that they need. And if the tools are out there, let's use them, because if we use them, then we can make a better generation for our children.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you ladies for coming out tonight and shedding some light on Beauty from Ashes, the Trauma Symposium. It's an event, I guess, starting June 7th through the 14th. I guess there's the bazaar and the forum and the professional dinner and some other things. Thank you guys.
Thank you
for coming out and spending some time with us. We'll leave it at that. This is the It's Your Perspective talk show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. until. We'll be back tomorrow night. We do have another guest lined up. Audrey, you have any final thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much for having me co-hosting with you, and thank you ladies for coming out and putting this together. It's so important. But I'll leave you with this. Sometimes when things are falling apart, they may actually be falling into place. Sometimes when things are falling apart, they actually may be falling into place. Stay smiling, love yourselves, give yourselves a hug every day.
All right, so we'll leave it at that. This is the It's Your Perspective talk show. We're out. Peace.